My name is Danelle Klassy, and I am an American Sign Language interpreter. I am here today to provide you guys with the tools you need to effectively communicate with a person who is deaf or hard of hearing. I started this presentation out by signing. I got these looks of puzzlement. You guys were probably thinking, why is she signing? We are hearing. I wanted to give you guys just a little glimpse into what it may be like for a deaf or hard of hearing individual in the hearing world, being surrounded by people who are only speaking and not signing. So, I want to first get to know you guys. Who here has ever met a deaf or hard of hearing person before? Just a simple show of hands is fine. Perfect, just a few of you have. Have any of you met or interacted with an interpreter? Well, today you've met one. I am an interpreter. Okay, and so for those of you who have met a deaf person and have had to communicate with them, have you used an interpreter? Just a few. How about writing back and forth? Okay, that's many more of you. And that's the norm in a sense of there's not always that interpreter available. But I'm going to give you guys the tools you need to provide an interpreter at your job. First, okay, so you're at work and there's been a request for an interpreter. And you wonder, do I need to provide? Yes, you do. According to the ADA, unless doing so will result in an undue burden, which is defined as a significant difficulty or expense. In only that situation, and if you can prove that, by law, you need to provide. Also, according to the ADA, and I quote, "No individual shall be discriminated against on the basis of disability in the full and equal enjoyment of goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations of any place of public accommodations by any person who owns, leases, or operates a place of public accommodation." In simple terms, if a person has access, let's make it accessible. So in the instance of a deaf person, if we can provide a service to help their language, or to help there not to be a language barrier, let's do it. Okay, so hiring an interpreter. How in the world do I do that? Well, I have prepared for you guys, and it's in your packet of information, this booklet. And within this booklet, I have included lists of agencies in the area, which some are CSD, Communication Services for the Deaf, ASLIS, it's American Sign Language Interpreting Services. Those are two agencies. I've also included a list of numerous interpreters in this area who are available for freelance work. So what do I do? Okay, so you find an agency or you find a freelance interpreter who you'd like to call, and you place the call. And what do you need to be prepared with? You need to know, first and foremost, the date, the time, the location, the length of time you will need an interpreter, and the nature of the appointment. These are all, the interpreter is very likely going to ask you these questions, so it's best that you be prepared for it. Okay. So you've made the call, you've found an interpreter, the day has come for the appointment. So now the interpreter's there, the deaf person's there, and you are there. So the first thing I really want you guys, before the deaf person even gets there, I want you guys to know that deaf people can do anything hearing people can do except hear. And that is a famous quote by I. King Jordan, one of the deaf presidents for Gallaudet University. And Gallaudet is a college for deaf individuals. Anyway, so deaf people can do anything a hearing person can do. Don't forget that. Okay. So when you're in the meeting, you want to set it up so that you have the interpreter, you have yourself, and then the deaf person. You want to make sure that that deaf person has equal view to both you and the interpreter. Now, who do I look at? Well, you look at the deaf person. You want to speak to this deaf person like there is nobody else in that room. The only job of that interpreter is to be a language facilitator, both culturally and linguistically. So address the deaf person directly. You don't want to say, oh, tell her or tell him. Speak directly to the person. Again, like you're the only two in the room. Another assumption, I guess you could say, is that all deaf people can read lips. That is not correct. Some can, and some will. But according to the CDC, only 40% of the English language is readable on the lips. Now, yourselves, imagine only understanding, at most, 40% of a conversation. That, to me, would be very frustrating. So, okay, that aside, let's think back to the setup again in the room. So we have the interpreter and you by each other, and then the deaf individual. Okay, you want to make sure the room is well lit. You want to keep eye contact throughout, and just carry on. As an interpreter, we don't want you guys to feel uncomfortable. And I do have a few more interaction do's and don'ts in the book as well. So please refer to this if you need. Okay, so a few frequently asked questions. This is only a few. I have many. But a few of them that you may have thought of as I was first talking. Okay, you need to get an interpreter. Well, what's that? Okay, a certified interpreter. What's that? Okay, so the difference between a certified and an uncertified interpreter. A certified interpreter has gone through the right channels with the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf to become a nationally certified interpreter, whereas an uncertified interpreter is working in the field but has not yet passed certification. A certified interpreter is who you want to aim to hire. They have more credentials and they are nationally recognized as being competent in the field. Okay, so who pays for the interpreter? Your agency does. Your company does. The organization providing the interpreter will. That deaf person who is coming as an individual, just like one of us. Okay, so do I still pay if the deaf client doesn't show up? You do. Unless an interpreter is given, and depending on their contract, between 24 to 48 hours, if they are not given that notice, the interpreter still will charge because they have given that time to your company and possibly has turned away other jobs, and so just rightfully so that interpreter is paid. Okay, and what is the average rate of an interpreter? It's hard to say. Depending on the credentials, depending on their level of certification, depending on the area in which you live. I do have in our question and answers in my booklet here, according to the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, salary statistics for individuals is very difficult to find, as salaries vary depending on many factors. Like I had said, the geographical area, credentials, the amount of experience, the type of interpreter, such as freelance, or whether you work as a freelance interpreter with a contracted agency. Another thing that does affect it too is education. Okay, let's keep going. I know you guys probably have tons of questions yourselves. I hope I can answer a few here. Okay, so how far in advance do I need to request an interpreter? Okay, if you get a call on Monday and you need an interpreter Wednesday, please call. Try to find an interpreter. Short notice is tough, but it's still doable. It's never too early. Never too early. If it's a month or 2 or 3 months in advance and you need to find an interpreter, please try as soon as you can. Okay, so a few more questions. If you have an employee who signs, why can't we use them? Well, just because you sign doesn't mean you are a good interpreter, and that does not guarantee that you are providing the best services for that deaf client. So why can't a family member just sign for them? Well, ethically, it's just not appropriate. It would be just like a surgeon operating on his wife. It's just not something that, as a family member, you want to take on. And why can't you write back and forth? There's nothing saying you can't, but it is not always the preferred method of communication for that deaf person, especially if they have requested an interpreter. Okay, so that's just a few questions that you guys may have. So please, there are more in my pamphlet here that I, like I said, have in all of your booklets here. There's a list of interpreters, the agencies, and just a lot more information in here. So please read up on it, and here's my contact information. If you'd like to get a hold of me, please do. And thank you again for your time.